Hello, and today we're going to be wrapping up our talk about the First World War with the culminating peace treaties that ultimately end the conflict. Now, these peace treaties are going to be orchestrated out of a peace conference that takes place in Paris that begins in January of 1919. Now, while there will be many countries taking part in the negotiations, the main plans are being worked out by a group of leaders known as the Big Four. That is David Lloyd George from Britain, George Clemenceau, he's the guy with the mustache right above me, from France, Woodrow Wilson, the tall guy to Clemenceau's left, and Vittorio Orlando from Italy. Out of this Paris Peace Conference will become a number of treaties. First and foremost, the Treaty of Versailles that ends the war with Germany, the Treaty of Saint-Germain with Austria, Trianon with Hungary, and the Treaty of Sèvres with the Ottoman Empire. There are some important goals for the participants in this Paris Peace Conference, and they don't all line up with each other. France, most of the war, remember, was fought in France on the Western Front. They wanted to be the powerhouse, or they want to be the hegemonic power in Europe at the time. So to do that, they've got to cripple Germany. They want to break up Germany, and they want heavy punitive reparations, payments that Germany would have to pay. Britain supported fewer reparations, hoping that Germany could become a trade partner going forward. Of course, the British countryside was not ravaged by war. They're also concerned about notions of self-determination, especially when it comes to people outside of Europe. Britain does not want to see independence movements happening in its colonies in India, for example. The United States is being led by Woodrow Wilson, who is using his 14 points as a plan for shaping this conference. He wants fewer reparations for Germany, does not want to see this as a punishing treaty because he wants to put the world together in such a way that maybe a future conflict would not be possible. Also, he sees Germany as well as a future trade partner. So we can see that France and Britain and the United States are all coming to this treaty negotiation with different views on what should come out of it. They do have some common aims, though. They all want to see an end to German militarism. They all want to restore stability to Europe. They have a desire to satisfy nationalist aspirations within Europe, particularly in the Balkan region. And then they want to redraw that map of Europe following the conflict. Also, as a common aim, the desire to create some kind of new world order where a war like this could never be fought again. So what comes out of these treaties? First, we're going to deal with the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles is punishing to Germany. This is a punitive treaty, and Germany doesn't have any voice in these negotiations. They pretty much have to accept whatever the Allied powers are giving to them. So for Germany, they're going to lose tremendous amounts of territory. First, all of their colonies overseas, the German Empire is done for. Next, they're going to lose territory all around their border. So the region of Alsace and Lorraine that has been fought over already. Territory will be lost to Germany, or to Denmark, pardon me, in the north. Territory will be lost in Germany's east to create a new country of Poland. And that's really interesting. Please notice what is called the Polish Corridor. The new nation of Poland will now bisect Germany. So Germany is going to be Germany, the mainland, and now Germany, East Prussia in the east. The Rhineland region of Germany will be occupied. That's the western part of Germany, will be occupied by the Allies. The Saar region, just within that Rhineland region, the Saar region of Germany will have its coal and iron production going over to France for the next 15 years. And then also with regard to territory, no Anschluss with Austria. The word Anschluss is a German word for political union, and Germany is forbidden from joining together with Austria. Germany is also going to be demilitarized. We already mentioned the Rhineland will be an occupied zone. Germany will not be permitted to ever have any military within that demilitarized Rhineland. The German army is going to be shrunk to only 100,000 men, and this is incredibly small coming out of World War I when armies numbered in the many millions. The German Navy is going to have to be surrendered to the Allies. Germany will not be allowed to have any more submarines. Germany cannot have any air force anymore. Germany is also going to be forced to pay punitive reparations. These are the payments that are going to be that Germany is going to have to make to countries like France and Belgium for the costs of the war, to civilian losses, the loss of civilian lands and property and lives. This all comes out of Germany being forced to sign what was called Article 231 of the Treaty of Versailles, or the War Guilt Clause. Germany had to accept responsibility for this war in order to then make Germany pay for what they are now responsible for. Some other considerations to keep in mind about the Treaty of Versailles. Russia was not included in the negotiations. Russia, remember, had their revolutions. The second revolution was a Bolshevik revolution. So now the Russian government is a communist government. Western powers like Britain and France and the United States do not want to work with that new communist government. Also, Russia's in the middle of a civil war going on in 1919, 1920. And this is certainly, the Western powers are actually supporting the opponents of the Bolshevik government in Russia. So Russia is not there. Germany has no opportunity to oppose any of the restrictions that are being put on it. Also, that Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, this was the treaty between the new Russian government and the German government during the war, when Russia backed out of the war. This is going to be voided because that German government of the Kaiser does not exist anymore. Also out of the Treaty of Versailles and these other treaties is the creation of the League of Nations. Woodrow Wilson saw this as the most important aspect of his 14 points, to create a new international organization that will keep the peace in Europe through collective security. Collective security is a really important idea, and it's essentially meaning that all of the nations of the world, or at least of this League of Nations, will join with each other in order to stop future aggressive actions. The League of Nations is meant to encourage international cooperation. Obviously, this is an opposite idea of the nationalism before the First World War. This is a new internationalism after the war. But there are problems with the League, and we're going to be able to talk about these much more as we go forward. The United States is not going to join. This is a part of the American Constitution that even though the president can work on treaties, it is ultimately the United States Senate that ratifies treaties. And the American Senate, led by Republicans in 1920, did not want to touch this Treaty of Versailles because it had the League of Nations worked into it. So the United States never ratifies these Paris Peace Conference treaties because of the creation of a League of Nations and the fear that a League of Nations could drag the United States into future European conflicts that many in the United States did not want to see happen. Also, the Central Powers, Germany, the new Austria, these countries are not going to be in the League of Nations at its outset. Later on, they'll be invited in, but at the beginning, they are not members of the League of Nations. The Soviet Union is also excluded. So we've got some really important powers in Europe and the world that are not a part of the League of Nations, which is going to challenge the legitimacy of that League of Nations right from the start. There's also no armed forces within the League. The only military action that the League can do is if all of its cooperating members would agree to support a military action. These are obviously going to be problems we'll deal with in the 1930s. There are other treaties that come out of the Paris Peace Conference: Saint-Germain with Austria, Trianon with Hungary. This is the breakup of Austria-Hungary into many now new smaller nations. We'll see the creation of Czechoslovakia. Now, as a note, keep in the back of your mind, the new Czechoslovakia is going to include in its western region a part called Sudetenland. And this is a region that is largely German speaking, and that's going to be a problem in the 1930s. We'll get there soon. Some land will be granted to Italy from the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. But this region is still going to have minority issues. Not everybody's going to be happy. There's going to be, for example, some Polish people living in Czechoslovakia, Germans living in Czechoslovakia. The lines between these countries are not always clear, and there will be border disputes between the new countries created. The Ottoman Empire will have a treaty that comes for it as well, called the Treaty of Sèvres. This will cede Ottoman territories largely to Britain and France, but also Greece and Italy. And this will be another story that'll develop in the 1920s when after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, a new Turkish government will demand a renegotiated treaty. Last but not least, I want you to take a look at this new map of Europe that we see in the aftermath of the First World War. One of the most important changes is that of these territorial boundaries. So notice we have a Poland that has now been created out of land that was once controlled by Russia and Germany. There's, of course, a Czechoslovakia and an Austria and a Hungary, a larger Yugoslavian nation that combined many of the Balkan states that had previously existed as part of the Ottoman Empire or Serbia, and that is what we got going on here. And I'm about to go teach a class. So you guys have a great one, and I'll see you next time.